Iran's attacks on Israel results in 3 deaths and more than 170 injuries. Iranian ambassador to the UN asserts Tehran's right to self-defense. And Iran withdraws from nuclear talks with the United States. Israel's military has released footage claiming to show strikes on Iranian targets after its largest air offensive aimed at halting Iran's alleged nuclear ambitions. The Israeli military posted the surveillance video on Telegram, saying its air force continues to strike threats inside Iran. The move follows a wave of Israeli attacks, which Tehran countered by launching hundreds of ballistic missiles. Israeli health officials say Iran's latest attack killed 3 people and injured more than 170 as tensions escalate across the region. Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed responsibility for Operation True Promise 3, saying over 150 Israeli sites were hit. The operation used drones that reportedly breached Israeli air defenses. Senior Iranian commanders now threaten to escalate further, vowing to strike U.S. bases and unleash a barrage 20 times larger in future attacks on Israel. Also, the Iranian army's air defenses shot down an Israeli F-35 fighter jet that intruded into its airspace over western Iran. Reports indicate that the pilot ejected but remains unaccounted for. Iran's army says it has hit multiple targets inside Israeli-occupied territories using rush-suicide drones following Israeli strikes on Iran. Iranian forces confirmed drone attacks on Israeli positions, while Israeli media reported a 5th wave of Iranian missile strikes hitting areas in Tiberias, the occupied Golan, and Lower Galilee. The escalation comes after Israeli airstrikes on Iranian cities, including Tehran, where senior military officials were reportedly assassinated. Air traffic has sharply declined over Iran and Israel following Israeli strikes on key military and nuclear sites in Iran. Flight tracker data shows aircraft rerouting around Iranian airspace after Israel launched targeted strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, missile factories, and military leaders. The operation is part of Israel's push to stop Iran's alleged atomic weapons program. Flight Tracker 24 also showed reduced activity over Israeli airspace amid fears of further escalation. Iran is calling on the United Nations to take immediate action after what it calls Israeli acts of war violating its sovereignty. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that Israel's strikes hit both military and civilian sites. He invoked Iran's right to self-defense under international law. Guterres condemned the attacks and pledged efforts to de-escalate the growing conflict. Iran's UN ambassador has labeled Israel's recent attacks as a declaration of war and called for international action. Saeed Erivani told the UN Security Council that Israel's strikes were acts of terrorism targeting Iran's sovereignty, including peaceful nuclear sites. He invoked Article 51 of the UN Charter, affirming Iran's right to self-defense. Erivani warned that any Iranian response will be lawful and proportionate, and urged the Council to prevent further aggression.
They share full responsibility for the consequences. Supporting Israel today is supporting war.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has informed Russian President Vladimir Putin that Israel's aggression against Iran will elicit a fitting response. During their call, Putin condemned the Israeli strikes, expressing condolences for the loss of civilians, nuclear scientists, and military officials. He labeled the attacks a violation of international law and offered to mediate to reduce tensions. Pezeshkian thanked Putin for his support and highlighted Israel's ongoing attempts to escalate regional conflicts. Iran's supreme leader has vowed serious consequences after Israeli strikes, warning Tel Aviv it has made a grave mistake. Ali Khamenei declared that Israel will face decisive retaliation with no leniency, saying its future will be dire, emphasized national unity behind Iran's armed forces, and vowed a significant response to what he called Zionist aggression. Khamenei said Iran will prevail in its confrontation with Israel. Iran says 60 people, including 20 children, were killed in an Israeli strike on Tehran. Iranian state TV aired footage of a destroyed residential complex in the capital, reporting heavy civilian casualties. The attack comes amid a wave of missile exchanges between Israel and Iran. Israeli forces claim they struck over 150 sites across Iran, targeting key military and nuclear personnel in their largest offensive to date. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark in our newsroom.
Thank you, Selma. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, for more on this, we're now joined by Dr. Amr Hussain, who is a researcher in international relations, speaking to us from Cairo. Welcome to Q News. So to what extent do you think Israel is provoking regional instability, either intentionally or otherwise?
I think that the repercussions of just a confrontation between Israel and Iran will be having a great repercussions, and as every 1 hour there is a development, and it's what happened yesterday and today of Iranian response targeting 6 waves of ballistic missiles that hit Israeli cities, and what happened today of military strikes in Tehran and Isfahan. Today witnessed a great development targeting in the first oil facility in Isfahan. So that would mean breaking the red lines and rules of engagement that would alarm or spark the expanding of the confrontation, and that cannot be ended in a few days. And it is expected of continuing confrontations of jobs war, and it was supposedly from the international community to intervene to let the two parties back on negotiation table.
And would you say there's any credible evidence for Israel's justification for launching these strikes? Of course, they give the pretext of a nuclear threat. Is there any evidence for that in reality? A nuclear bomb is just around the corner?
There are no evidence of Iran position or having any nuclear weapons, as the percentage of enrichment is only 60%, and the percentage that would allow to have a nuclear bomb is 90%. Tehran has engaged in an agreement by President Obama, cancelled off by President Trump. So it is the Iran's right to enrichment of uranium and generate peaceful purposes energy, but U.S. never wished to have a nuclear program in Tehran or any program of nuclear reactors, and the nuclear program should be dismantled like the Libyan nuclear program of Libya, which is Iran rejected as the law of the nuclear energy would allow the countries throughout the world of enrichment of uranium, provided not to produce any nuclear weapons. So the whole world condemned all strikes hit by Israel against Iran that would lead to more escalations in the region.
And of course, Iran has today said that any nation's property or perhaps military bases, any nation that supports Israel, they could attack, like U.S. military bases. This could be a very dangerous escalation for Iran.
Iran today warned Israel of targeting it once again, as Iran had felt its status was damaged following the assassination of more than 23 of senior leaders of Revolutionary Guard, along with the military senior leaders as the Chief of Staff Salami. So Iran sees that its pride would damage this. The response of the Revolutionary Guard was to targeting Israel of more than 2,000 missiles, and targeting any state would help Israel, as Iran had the right to defend itself. And I think today we'll be witnessing another confrontation and Iranian retaliation by hypersonic missiles or ballistic missiles, as Israel is targeting within Iran and in the capitals of Iran.
Now, there were meant to be discussions, nuclear talks between the United States and Iran this weekend. Iran said it won't be going to them, unsurprisingly. Russia has offered to mediate on Iran's behalf. China has also extended that invitation to mediate. Do you think that either of these options are likely?
Foreign Minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, declared not to presume the negotiations and fully rejecting to submit the Trump's demand of meeting Witkoff, as Iran was targeted by, along with the breaking all the red lines. I may say that a mediation, or the Russian mediation role, could be played, as Russia considers Iran as in a strategic depth, and striking Iran in that way represented the infringement of the Russian-Iranian partnership, as we all know, along with China. And Iran is using the Russian technology in the nuclear reactors, and this also would damage this matter. And Russia never wished to have Iran damaged, and we also seen that Russia assisted Iran by the aircraft of Shahid and ballistic missiles. So I think that the course of negotiations at this moment is frozen until we reach to a balance point, which is to have some sort of not to have a retaliation between the two sides. So then we'll have some sort of a balance through which we would build the negotiations once again, then sit in the table of negotiations, and through which it would achieve more gains when both sides are sitting on the table once again.
And as we were hearing in our bulletin with Selma, flight trackers are showing that airspace avoidance over Iran and Israel is currently taking place. People going round, the aeroplanes going round. This is causing problems, of course, for global aviation. How deep, looking at the broader perspective, how deep is the economic disaster that could happen if this conflict continues?
such a conflict would lead some sort of escalation, particularly as Israel had targeted the nuclear reactors within Iran, such as Natanz, producing the enriched uranium and operated by the heavy water that would alarm the whole region to be ignited once again. So the whole region is exposed to more escalation in the Middle East, as Israel might target the nuclear reactors, and Iran also could
I think, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Dr. Amr Hussein, who's a researcher in international relations. Thank you very much for joining us from Cairo. Now back to you in the studio, Salma.
Thank you, Mark, for conducting this analysis. Iran has withdrawn from nuclear talks with the U.S., canceling the sixth round of negotiations set for tomorrow in Oman. Tehran's decision follows Israeli strikes on Iranian military and nuclear facilities. These so-called preemptive attacks escalated tensions, prompting Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to vow retaliation and make Israel miserable. Iran responded with missile launches as UN Chief Antonio Guterres urged restraint and a political resolution to the crisis. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that there is no justification for continuing nuclear talks with the United States in light of the continued Israeli attacks. Despite Iran's withdrawal, the Washington Post reported from a U.S. official that the United States is still interested in conducting talks with Iran. Germany is ramping up protection around Israeli and Jewish sites after Israel's sweeping airstrikes on Iran. Chancellor ordered heightened security following deadly cross-border attacks between Iran and Israel. Berlin also pledged protection for German nationals across the region. Iran says Israeli strikes on a housing complex in Tehran killed around 60 people, including 20 children. The escalation follows Israel's bid to halt Iran's nuclear capabilities. Russia has begun evacuating its citizens from Iran through Azerbaijan amid Israeli airstrikes. Dozens of foreign nationals, mostly Russians, crossed into Azerbaijan at the Azara checkpoint on June 14th after Baku temporarily reopened its border with Iran. The first group of evacuees included 86 people, among them 2 children. Moscow cited urgent safety concerns and urged citizens to leave both Iran and Israel, warning against travel to the region. Video of the evacuation was shared by the Russian Foreign Ministry. Two senior officials from the Iranian armed forces were confirmed assassinated in the Israeli military strikes on Iran. Both Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations Brigadier General Mahdi Rabbani and Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence Brigadier General Mehrabi were both identified as victims of these attacks, which have escalated tensions in the region. Iran's supreme leader has appointed Brigadier General Amir Hatami as the new commander of the Iranian army. Khamenei prompted Hatami to Major General, calling for a transformative approach to boost combat readiness and spiritual vigilance. Hatami previously served as defense minister from 2017 to 2021. He replaces Major General Abdul Rahim Mousavi in a move seen as part of Iran's military recalibration amid rising tensions. For a second day, Israel has kept Palestinian cities under lockdown in the occupied West Bank amid its ongoing strikes on Iran. The Israeli occupation army has sealed off towns with iron gates and dirt mounds, sparking fears among residents of prolonged confinement. The move coincides with Israel's largest air offensive against Iran to date, launched on June 13th to halt Tehran's nuclear program. Tensions remain high across both fronts. Egypt's foreign minister is urging calm and respect for sovereignty amid rising tensions following Israeli strikes on Iran. Badr Abdel Ati spoke with Italy's Antonio Tajani and Spain's José Manuel Albares, condemning Israel's attacks as dangerous escalations threatening regional stability. He stressed the need to de-escalate and uphold sovereignty. The ministers also discussed joint efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza as violence spreads beyond Palestinian territories. Pope Leo is calling on Iran and Israel to act with reason and pursue dialogue following recent airstrikes. Speaking at St. Peter's Basilica, the Pope voiced deep concern over escalating tensions and urged both sides to avoid further violence. He called for responsible action and a renewed global effort to eliminate nuclear threats. Emphasizing peace, justice, and human dignity, he urged respectful dialogue to build a safer world.
Un incontro rispettoso e un dialogo sincero.
China has condemned Israel's military strikes on Iran, warning against targeting peaceful nuclear sites and urging diplomatic solutions. Speaking at an IAEA meeting, China's envoy Li Song criticized the use of force and unilateral sanctions, saying they endanger regional stability and derail nuclear talks. He reaffirmed Beijing's support for diplomacy and a nuclear weapon-free Middle East, calling for a renewed commitment to global non-proliferation goals. The Non-Proliferation Treaty is a landmark global pact aimed at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and promoting peaceful use of nuclear energy. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has affirmed the urgent need to respect established international laws and principles. That came during his call with French President Emmanuel Macron, where they addressed regional and international developments, military escalation, and the Palestinian cause. Both leaders emphasized the importance of continued coordination to address regional and global crises and affirmed their commitment to strengthening bilateral relations, particularly in economic and investment sectors. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. Iran's attacks on Israel results in 3 deaths and more than 170 injuries. Iranian ambassador to the UN asserts Tehran's right to self-defense. And Iran withdraws from nuclear talks with the United States. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.